Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Danae, and I'm here with a message for you. Now, today I have this card turned over because this is where I was guided to stop shuffling. And I know lately I have been leaving the cards turned over and even cutting the deck, but today I felt that the message today is about power, the use and abuse of power, which is representative here in this Ace of Wands. Now, good news first. I'll say sweet message first. The message of my yogi tea bag today is travel in grace, knowing that you are protected by love. So there's that, and I'm sure it will apply even in this reading, but it's definitely a connection to my reading yesterday where I talked a lot about embarking on a new journey. When I watched that reading back, so many things were unveiled to me that I'm going to probably expound on in addition to some other downloads in another video. But I wanted to share that connection to that video, that message particularly. If you haven't caught it yet, I would definitely suggest that you tap in. Second, and let me give what is it called? What's that warning that used to be on like the CDs, parental advisory. If you are particularly sensitive to hardcore content or lyrics, then you may not appreciate this channeled music message in the form of Prodigy and Havoc, also known as Mobb Deep. Those two of their songs popped up in my spirit today, literally in my spirit. And one of them actually kind of like was mashing into the other one. They're two separate songs, but one led me to the other, and they kind of all just collided into one energy. But one, if you're familiar with hip hop, real hip hop, because this is authentic, like hardcore, one of the most hardest beats and even lyricists in history, quite honestly. This dynamic duo of sorts. And I'll talk about the synergy of the two of them in a second too. Trust me, even if you're not a hip hop fan or a rap fan, it will matter. It will make sense, I'm sure. But Shook One's Part 2 is one of their most infamous songs, literally. They call themselves the Infamous. And what is it? Son, they shook, cause ain't no such things as halfway crooks. Scared to death, scared to look, they shook. Cause ain't no such things as halfway crooks. Scared to death, scared to look. Living the life that of diamonds and guns. There's numerous ways you can choose to earn funds. Some get shot, locked down, and turn nuns. Cowardly hearts and straight up shook ones. He ain't a crook, son. He just a shook one. Now that's Shook Ones. I'm not even going to attempt to go in on those verses, but I'm going to post them both on the community tab, both songs, because the other one that led me into was Survival of the Fittest. Now, Shook Ones, I actually, believe it or not, wrote a dope-ass freestyle to that. I posted it on one of my older channels. I don't know if I can... I think it got copywritten, honestly, because I had the instrumental kind of playing in the background. So I don't know if I want to even take the risk, but what I will say is that one day I'm going to definitely record that officially, because it's a testament to my personal journey and my spiritual awakening, which was almost a very rude awakening in a sense to exactly what my reality was in real time, and the things that I was encountering in my life in a very material and actual sense, and in a deep, dark psychological sense, where things just became uncovered for the truth of what they were. So I had written a freestyle at that time to kind of express that energy. And if I do say so myself, it was pretty damn clever. So one of these days I'm going to share it. But anyway, the second song I would like to share that was channeled today is Survival of the Fittest. Now, just the title alone, definitely is a correlation, especially with the energy that's been channeling through these days about, spiritual awakenings and those that are, really fighting the good fight for their own sovereignty and independence. And, ultimately people are dropping like flies energetically and actually in a lot of ways, not to be, I guess I did say parental advisory here, but not to be morbid, but even if it's not in a physical sense, some people are just waving a white flag energetically and are not fit for the battle, or at least are surrendering to the enemy in some regard. So I'm going to post them both on the community tab if you care to check them out. But that's Shook Ones Part 2. Survival of the Fittest starts to all the killers and the $100 billers. To real who ain't got no feelings. Isn't that the one? Am I getting that wrong? Yeah, that's the one, I think. So to see, this is what happens. I mix them up. And to that point, I mix them up all the time. And I love both of them equally. I love both of those songs, but sometimes they just kind of mesh together in my head. But to that point, as I said, the name of the rappers in the group Mobb Deep are Prodigy and Havoc. Now, peace to the guy Prodigy, because he's no longer with us. He passed away some time ago with complications, I believe, from sickle cell. But Havoc is the remaining member who actually was the producer. So Havoc was the producer. Prodigy was the lyricist. Havoc is the lyricist too. I'm certain. I'm almost positive Prodigy wasn't writing the rhymes for both of them. But it was the synergy between the two of them that just made them so dynamic, like so dope. And like I said, like some of the hardest lyrics, and they were young. I'm talking like, I think he said in one of his songs, I'm only 19, but my mind is old, and something. I forgot. I don't know all the lyrics, but when it's on, I do though. But yeah, only 19 at the time they were doing their thing, like ripe energies, but minds old and probably aged by way of their experiences, growing up in Queens and things of that nature. But this is not an unsung for Prodigy and Havoc, but what I'm trying to say is consider the vibration of those two words together. Prodigy, which has a very high vibrational context and connotation, someone that is kind of born to do something or is like almost anointed. Usually you think of like a child prodigy, which is in essence is what he was, because he was pretty young to be spitting the way that he was and to have the vision. Like they were ahead of their time lyrically and musically, because like I said, Havoc was the producer. That's the other half, and think of the connotation of that name, havoc, like when you wreak havoc on something, chaos, turmoil. So you had these two polar opposites coming together in one unified force. And if you know, when it comes to hip hop and rap. But if you don't know, Shook Ones Part 2 still to this day is hands down one of the most infamous hip hop rap beats of all times. Like every lyricist, every artist gives respect to that track and ultimately would spit on it if given a moment's notice to do so, and definitely freestyle to it. It's infamous in terms of freestyling as well too. It's just something about the I don't know, like the vibration of it that just hits hard, and then when you have just the instrumental alone, mind you. So then when you have the lyrics behind that, which are so raw and so reckless in some regards too, but just real to their experiences at the time, which we know in that time, in that era, like the 90s and coming through the 80s, was a bit bleak for a black man, So all of that wrapped up in one is what, and also, Ace of Wands. Now, I was shuffling and I stopped here before I got the download. So this is just how spirit is just aligning everything. It all makes sense. But I went into a little bit of a zone listening to those songs, because of course they came up. I had to go listen to them. And just the realness, the rawness of it all, like them just saying it straight up and down as it is, even in survival of the fittest, like some of the lyrics that are so forward and direct to their so-called ops, or, you know, to whomever it is they were addressing, you know, God knows who at this point in time, if anyone particularly, but you felt it. You felt the energy. You felt the severity, you know, and of that message, you know. And it's something about it that really pierced my spirit today. And it spoke to me in regards of this tug of war between the use and abuse of power, you know, and it can come by way through words for certainly and for sure. But when it comes to the balancing of such, of that of which I've been getting a lot of downloads about lately, it's about the light and the dark. So again, the prodigy and the havoc, the peace and the chaos, which kind of come together and in harmony, literally, like in harmony, in essence, for one dynamic purpose, that there is a place for the two, but in harmony and in balance. And the imbalance of such has been in this time that there's been far more havoc on, dare I say, on prodigies in spirit and in truth, energetically and physically so, mentally, spiritually, everything across the board, by way of these energies that have been assuming an overuse and abuse of power in ways that until now has been completely unjustified, and so now is being balanced and harmonized for the good of all. So I don't know where the reading is going to go, but I'm going to take a sip of this tea. I know that was a lot for an intro, so pardon me. You know, if you felt I may even timestamp, I don't know, but honestly, at this point in time, if you aren't really rocking with me for the whole of it, then that's understandable. There definitely is no love lost there. So that's, I guess, what the fast forward button is. But let's see what this message is saying today. What's that song? Oh, there's a war going on outside. No man is safe from. You can run, but you can't hide forever from these streets that we done took. You walking with your head down, scared to look. Shook, cause ain't no such things as halfway crooks. They never around when the beef cooks in my part of town. They similar to Vietnam. It's similar to Vietnam. That's survival of the fittest. The beginning of what I said to all the killers in $100 bill is that's Shook Ones Part 2. And some of the language is the same, which is why sometimes I mix it up. And Shook Ones is my favorite beat. But that verse I just said is one of my favorite verses. So it's like a crisscross between the two. I love Shook Ones beat, but I love that verse because it's so hard. You gotta listen to it. Yeah. And this is that, Shook Ones, right here. And this 9 of Wands, looking at their fate, because what's coming in but this temperance, like I said. Those that have been abusing their power and authority in the land, in spirit and in truth, are now reckoning with the spirit of temperance. And that spirit is vibrational from the inside out as much as it is from the outside in. It's more of an internal implosion than it is like an external attack, because what's happening is those that are experiencing a decline or a decrease or altogether disconnection between themselves and their power. This Ace of Wands is representing power. You know, the wand is creative force. It is divine, but in the wrong hands with the wrong intentions, it becomes diabolical very easily. You know, you can have someone with hella gifts, but if they're using it to destroy and not to build, then it's, even if it does come from God or come from some divine source, it doesn't have a divine ordinance anymore the moment you decide to use it as some use it in a way that destroys others unjustifiably, you know? And that's the reckoning that's happening here. And it's like they're having an outer body experience. That's what this is giving me here with the Page of Swords and the Nine of Wands, because they're only able to pretty much just watch themselves. I just heard something. There's what's that word? What was that? Not occupation. Well, possession is ultimately what it is. That there's so much imbalance. This is what this card is about: energetic and mental imbalance, like disturbance. As a matter of fact, there's so much imbalance energetically from the energy that was expelled, you know, in this abusive way, that now that it's returning, Temperance card, that balancing, that reckoning, cause and effect, spirit becoming matter, ultimately. Now that it's returning, it's completely like taking over the vessel. You know, it's like it's saturating the vessel in a sense where there feels like almost a lack of control anymore over self. And that self is almost being possessed, literally being possessed or overrun by some other force that is, you know, as I said, tipped in the scale of diabolical against divine, you know. It's out of alignment now completely. And then the Page of Swords is like somebody that's literally looking at themselves almost from the outside in, but it's the psyche. It's like they're watching themselves do things that they know they don't really want to do, but there's almost like this automatic, I don't even know what to call it, like it's like robotic in a sense, but it's more automatic, like not robotic in a sci-fi way, but it's energetically compulsive, you know, because I think compulsive is an impulse. Compulsive is more when you feel like you don't even have control over your actions. You know, there's something that just compels you to act, or you do it out of incitement or some stimuli, but you would otherwise choose against it if you could, you know. This Page of Swords is giving me energy that like outside looking in, but somebody actually in their body, almost observing themselves doing things and being taken over by an entity or a force that they don't even completely identify with anymore. Like they don't even recognize themselves, is what I see with the Page of Swords and this Nine of Wands. And it is scary. That's why I said, yeah, shook ones, because there's almost like this anxiety or what is that word for this card? The Nine of Wands is definitely energetic imbalance and mental imbalance, but it's like PTSD is kind of what it is, but it's really on account, it's really a self-inflicted wound, as we call this card the Wounded Warrior. It's a self-inflicted wound in a sense, literally. Oh my God, I'm seeing something too. This is overexertion of passion, like literally somebody sexing themselves to death in a matter of speaking. This is a deep message. That's why I probably said parental advisory. What is that term? Parental advisory warning or whatever that is. This is that, okay? It's like, because I'm hearing sex magic. I'm going to speak plainly today. I'm not doing the whole SEX and all that. I'm just going to say it how I feel it, because I ain't got time for YouTube today. I'm hearing sex magic, and this is like all of the energy that was expelled, but because of, it's like you have the power to wield your own wand, right? Like literally, physically, and spiritually so. But like I said, the wand should be for procreation, something productive, for multiplying, advancing creativity in some way, whether we're talking about physically, carnally, actually, or we're even talking about energetically, spiritually, figuratively. When you're using your creativity for things that are producing in the earth, the spirit can support that and add value, literally temperance, peace, balance, harmony to your productivity and prosper you on that account. What other reason is there for someone to be looking back, first of all, with disdain almost at temperance, maybe just in regret? That's what it is, regret. It's regret, looking back at the ways in which they felt out of balance and out of alignment and not being happy about how they're being readjusted, or redirected in a sense. Not That's the disdain here. And the regret, as I've heard someone say it before, remorse is one vibration where you really feel sorry for what you did, and you have sympathy and empathy for those that may have been afflicted by your actions in one way or in one regard or another. Regret is when you just wish you had done something differently so you didn't get caught, or that you wish you could still continue doing what you're doing, or you regret maybe a misstep that puts you in the position that you're in. You know what I mean? That's a different. You can see it as how you will, but that I resonated with that when I heard it, and it makes a lot of sense. Even here, there's a look back at regret for actions that have been taken, as the Nine of Wands is, and the action has been on account of misusing this power, this wand, this creativity, this force of life force that was gifted to said individual. And this is not just one, this is many. As you can see, many wands. It's not about just this one person in this card. It's about the phallic that's been misused for the purposes of abusing energy, and not even just feminine energy, because it's been used to abuse creation overall, ultimately. And it's very much so in alignment with some of the things that have been downloaded to me lately that, again, may come out here, I don't know, but I feel like the cards are not the forum for me to really dig into it the way that I would want to, because a lot of times with the cards, I'm speaking fast because the messages are coming fast based on the incitements from the pictures. But when I sit down and write and get my thoughts together, although those are the messages that not a lot of people watch. If you go back even on my timeline, or through my history, there are a lot of messages where I'm not using cards that have something I think really powerful within them, something that I think probably if I even go look back now, I would gain something from it in a different way than I did even then. But a lot of times people don't see the cards and they're like, I skip that. But I hope maybe this is my advertisement, that when you see the message that pops up where I'm not using cards, it might even just be my notebook and me chit-chatting. Please don't take it lightly. Don't take it for granted, because the way that a lot of spiritualists in general are getting downloads now is really outside of the cards. And it's no shade to the cards, but it's something that's coming through. Like, I'm hearing things when I'm just standing in my kitchen trying to make me a cup of tea, and stuff is just downloading a mile a minute, like, whoa, what? And I'm just catching it in the spirit, And it's so overwhelming, to be honest with you, that I'm almost intimidated to go to my notes, because I almost feel a little bit not scattered, but it's just a bit of an overwhelm, and not in a negative way, but it's almost an honor in a sense to be hearing the way that I'm hearing, and to gather my thoughts in that regard is almost like a daunting task for me, because I don't want to miss anything, but I don't want to overstate anything, and I don't want to overshare something that may not be time to share, because everything that you hear in the spirit is not for you to actually speak out loud. And that's for any spiritualist that may be watching me right now. You have to know the timing. You have to have discerning, and divine timing is key, because you can release a word and it's not time for that seed to be planted, and it's just falling on bad soil, which has happened to me in the past. And maybe that's the reason why many people didn't look at those old videos. I don't know. But anyway, sorry, this is one of them messages that you're just going to have to rock with me. If you hear, you hear. If you're not, that's okay. But anyway, so that's that there. Out-of-body experience. We'll probably come back to that as we get more messages, but I want to keep going so that I don't belabor the point too much. All right, yeah. Oh, I'm not going to take, am I going to take this? Oh, it's not that many, it's 3. So, yeah, we got, we got the Hangman, we got the 6 of Cups, and we got the 8 of Swords. This is a past life regression that's ultimately been put to a halt. There's something, let me take a sip of this tea, one second. There's something that is, okay, I'm gonna say this. I kind of mentioned it too in my message yesterday briefly, where I said that I've been getting this download about this diabolical spirit that is coming through the masculine, that has been coming through the male seed, you know, that's the phallic hair, right? Go figure. And it's a spirit that moves through that force of creativity and reproduction, as I said, physically and figuratively. It's not limited to that, because those that are more advanced in their spiritual prowess have found ways to project that force that is not physical. You know, they've found ways to use mental manipulation and emotional manipulation as well. You know, literally tainting energetic forces in the earth, you know, so-called, what do we call them, like earth angels. But in a practical sense, we're talking about divine beings that have a high calling, that have a divine inheritance to receive and express in this earth. I'm coming to the knowledge that not everybody is that. I'm one of those utopian minds that would like to think that everybody has the same choice, everybody, you know, has the same chances, and, you know, everybody can more or less be exalted to some high level of life force. And perhaps that's where we're headed, you know, but up until this point, that has not been the case. There has been a very distinct bloodline by way of energy speaking. It doesn't have to be actual blood, but there's been an energetic field that has been procreated in this earth to more or less produce these higher vibrational essences of humans, you know, i.e. earth angels, more or less, that just have the capacity to really make spirit into matter. And to, this is like spiritual alchemy, or practically emotional transmutation, like energetic transmutation. So those that can really take the worst of their circumstances and like spin it into gold, you know, energetic gold though. So like consider the worst trauma, the darkest toxicity. You hear those horns? Thank you, Spirit. Toxicity, trauma, you know, a tumultuous life experience. And instead of being dragged down to it, like even as a wounded warrior, you know, being a victim to their circumstances and ultimately becoming a victimizer, they have allowed their minds to be exalted to a higher source of power by ultimately submitting to that higher source of power for understanding and fuel, you know, to continue on in the journey no matter how hard it gets. But the turnaround is that energy gets transmuted and it becomes something productive and to add value and prosperity into the earth. So someone that has gone through a great deal, and instead of becoming plainly that has been abused, and instead of becoming an abuser, they become an advocate for those that have been abused. They come and begin to like help others heal through their experience. They help others find value, you know, in the, find light in their darkness ultimately, help others that may not be as as savvy spiritually to transmute, to see things from a different perspective, because it's really hard to heal from some of the traumas that you experience in life. That's why it continues to be recycled as this abuse of power as it is, because it's what's the right word? It's a successful tactic of ultimately keeping the masses, and particularly those that have any high value to offer creation at all, suppressed. If you can keep individuals from transmuting by continuously pouring more toxicity, more poison in their cup, so that every time they try to shake it up and balance it out, there's more added to it, and they got to start all over again. Like, sometimes people get burnt out and they just give up because it's just too hard, And I feel like if there's anything that is definitely, I would say, unified among human beings in general, it probably is that we all have some form of trauma to overcome, some great, some small, depending on who you are. You know what I mean? For some, there, in essence, no one's trial and tribulation is greater or smaller than the other, because it could make a different impression on me than it could on someone else, But everyone has kind of been put in this wounded warrior position, because we're all kind of under the thumb, literally, of this energetic force, this principality, prince of the air, so to speak, that ultimately has an infectious impact on what we consume psychologically, and then ultimately what we breed, if that makes sense. Literally on the energetic field that we're all contributing to and ultimately consumed by. We all share that air. So I feel like this is even of a playing field as it gets. Like, all of our situations might not mirror or look exactly the same, but we all have something, some charge or challenge to overcome in order to ascend beyond, that confinement, that limitation that's been imposed on us pretty much since birth. If you really consider it, look, the Page of Swords here, it's like a childlike energy that you almost get inundated with psychological impressions, before you even know who you are. Literally, you're pretty much told what your name is. You're told where you come from. You're told what you should believe, how you should think, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what's right from wrong. Like, that's all an impression and a projection from a force outside of you, i.e. your mother, father, or whomever your caretaker was, that you have no say in ultimately, that you have to navigate with until some time of maturation, when you're able to pierce through and find some understanding on your own, find your own common ground. But like I said, that road is a treacherous one, and not everybody makes it out unscathed. Almost nobody actually makes it out unscathed, even if they don't realize it. But I think the issue here, especially when we're talking about the use and abuse of power and the disparity of those two ideals, is that some people make it out and they allow themselves to be raised above it, or for that, not to necessarily be consumed by it, but to use it to create. That's what the Temperance card is, finding peace and balance and harmony with your life experience and making something productive and prosperous of it. Some ultimately have build up such a disdain for their past experiences, or whatever energy they feel, or injustice they feel they've incurred, or injustice, or what's the word? Not imbalance, but instability, perhaps, that they've incurred. And usually with the Nine of Wands, is somebody especially here with the Six of Cups, is somebody that looks back in a way that almost is like it absolves them of any accountability or responsibility for their present position. So you might have someone that did go through a hell of a lot in their childhood, but they never really took the initiative to find common ground or find some means of healing or understanding or even acknowledgement. You know, in some regards, some suppress that vibration so deeply that they don't even realize that that's what they're operating from. That's what's literally fueling everything that they do, until it all ultimately just kind of blows up, because the universe eventually balances all things, and then everything that you have expelled, everything you've sown, every everything that you've sent out on account of this imbalance, then has to be reassumed ultimately. And that's where this out of body experience is coming from, because I don't think people that realized that there could ever be such an exchange, a return to sender in a sense, expected it to come back in this form, in the way that it has. Like who would, honestly? Because there's been some way that energies that have been ultimately expelling negative energy have found a way to relieve themselves of the consequences, or of assuming the impact. They've been able to deflect it, to transmute and alchemize in their own way. But again, that's a power that is divine, but that can be used diabolically. So the energy, for instance, consider a masculine who's just unhealthy and imbalanced energetically. So his wand is used more for lust. The way that he releases those toxins ultimately is through his wand and into other women. So that's where the conflict of creation comes into play, because you got hella masculines around here who haven't been willing to heal their traumas, that have been inseminating feminine energies, i.e. women, and those wombs have been polluted ultimately, and it really becomes up to the woman if she's able to, because like I said, everybody does not have this anointing, at least not at this point to my knowledge. But those that are able to transmute that type of energy and make it into something good have a hard road to do so. It's a great task and a great feat. It can be done, trust me, I know, but it's a great feat, to have as a woman who just having a reproductive experience on your own is enough of a mystery and a mystique and a challenge, but then having to transmute a seed that may be out of alignment with your innate divine nature, if it be so, because then God forbid she's lower vibrational too, which has been the case as to why there's been a reproduction of lower vibrational seed and creativity in the world, because each generation, instead of getting better, has actually been getting worse in some regards. I don't believe that holistically. I think we're actually on the upturn of that in a powerful way, but that's the evidence of what we're experiencing in life now, where you look at the world and you're like, what the hell is going on around here? It's because of this this procreation of poison is what I hear. Procreation of poison. And it's coming from a spiritual essence first, where the male seed has been corrupted and has been inseminating the feminine energy in the womb. And again, it doesn't have to be in the physical sense. When you have a masculine who holds the power as such that an Ace of Wands is, it's the most creativity and power in the planet, let alone in the deck. You know what I mean? But then when you have, in terms of force, now the most creative, productive power is the cup, the spirit. But when you have, like I said, procreate and poison, when that seed is tainting the cup, the spirit of creation, what do you get? You ultimately get poor productivity. You get a product that is, what do they call it when it's what's it called? Not abnormal, when you get those genes, irregular. You get an irregular product that ultimately is like not worth much more than flea market prices, that stuff that gets sent off to like Foreman Mills, if you know of a Foreman Mills, or those like warehouse type of vibes where all the irregular stuff goes there and you get it for like half the price. That's the energy of what I'm talking about here. Because of this seed of this corrupted seed that's been ultimately tainting feminine energy again, by way of emotional instability, mental and psychological manipulation, because you don't have to have sex with the woman to really turn her life upside down. You just being in her presence and presenting yourself as someone that she could or should trust, but then actually proving yourself to be the opposite is enough to really turn that cup upside down, because as a feminine energy, we are guided by our ability to trust our emotions and our intuition naturally. A masculine is guided by trust in his wand. And the issue with the corruption with the wand is that it's been the power of it has been distorted for it to be is like what the value of it has been depreciated ultimately. So the projection of what it truly is worth, as opposed to the market cost, so to speak, there's a great disparity. So you got masculines who don't know how precious their seed is, so they spread it everywhere. They don't know how powerful their force is, so they invested in all the wrong things and allow it to be used, and so it gets used and abused in ways, i.e. such as this, that are actually producing high volume, but not volume in a productive sense. Like at point in case where you're producing a whole bunch of irregular product, but it's really not great quality. You know what I mean? Like you just got hella jeans that got missing buttons and seem like one don't have a pocket. You might have to I don't know, like put a zipper in another, stuff like that. It's not whole and complete is what I'm saying. It's not whole and complete. Back to that prodigy and havoc energy. It's not one thing. Now, the energy that I was speaking about is more so in regards to having the light and the dark. And that is important too, because there is the energy of that chaos of which, is mysterious, the havoc, the mystique of life, of whence is outside of the box and outside of conventions of society as we know it, in addition to the things that are more normalized and, practicalized, the two of those coming together to make something magical. But back to what I was saying about the wand, the value of it has been depreciated so that those that are handling it, it's either inflated in such a way that they think they have more, that they think that there's more power due to it, like more than is the power is unlimited. But what I'm saying is, it's like, for instance, the imbalance of masculine and feminine energy right here, and not just globally, but nationally. Let's keep it on a smaller scale, but certainly globally, okay? Where the patriarchal society has ultimately been paramount for a long time, longer than any of us can think back to, you know what I mean? As long as we've all been alive, that I'm speaking to right now, where the masculine force has been the ruling force, and it's almost like suppressed the feminine force in a sense. It's like they couldn't really exist on one, exist co-creatively in a way that was harmonious, temperance, and balanced. Because this exaltation of the male phallus or the male energy has been inflated in such a way for the purposes of depreciating or deflating the feminine energy, when both are obviously equal. And the overuse and abuse of power, in some regards, it's like it's effed up, because it's been this infiltration of this diabolical spirit by way of the masculine, in the sense that it's become such a way of life that those that are so-called guilty of this overuse of power or misuse and abuse of power, in some regards, don't even mean to be. It's just become conventional and traditional to kind of act in the ways that we have. Now, what I'm saying is that there are some that absolutely have been intentional, and not only intentional from the most practical standards of our everyday life, but from a higher up down, like those that know that have some connection to the spirit itself, or at least, what can I say? At least, conjure it, that conjure this so that it can continue to create this imbalance, or at least they have up until now. They still are, but it's just not as successful as it has been, because the feminine energy has been more imbalanced than she is now. Like it kind of have transitioned from, speaking of which, like in the 90s and stuff, is kind of when there really started this movement of women, well, unfortunately, by circumstance, being more independent, because circumstances kind of shifted it that way, again, in a diabolical sense, and to the detriment of the family unit, where families were being separated by circumstance, by poverty, as said. That's why the songs were important, as in said communities such as, the inner cities and urban communities, the projects. Mobb Deep definitely speaks with that voice. Queensbridge is a housing project in Queens, New York. So that's the anger, the rawness, the rage almost, and in a sense also the hurt that they speak with, because you hear more of the fear and hurt also when you listen to it with mature ears. Like, man, y'all was really in fear for y'all lives most of the time. Sound like, that ain't no way to live when you always got to look over your shoulder because you feel like you're always a target. So I'm saying this to say, like, I know the 70s was more of a movement about femininity, like being more feminist movement, 60s to 70s, and it was kind of jilted in a way to start. Well, I don't know. It kind of was in a sense, but not as dynamically. It was like superimposed, I think, through the 80s and 90s, where at first it kind of started more as a movement to just liberate the woman, to know that she could have the same choices and should be considered equal and balanced with the masculine energy. And of course, we know what happened with that. That was definitely suppressed greatly, and kind of like, punched down to the ground ultimately. But what they did was, energetically, again, the powers that be, is that they transmuted, again, this abuse of power, they transmuted that energy and transferred it in a way that ultimately imposed this liberation onto to family units, such as those in the urban communities that were affected by poverty and widespread drug use, of which was infiltrated into the communities by our very, leaders. It was from the outside in. It wasn't from the inside out that these impositions were made. Again, abuse of power. And it caused a distortion in the family unit to the point where the feminine energy had no recourse but to do things on her own. And then when you introduce the elements of public housing and public assistance, where you were almost like slaved into disconnecting from your spouse or any other type of support, or you would ultimately be like fall victim to the system that was created for your demise. It's like a vicious cycle. And it's not relegated to race, although of course we know that there were certain marginalized peoples that were most affected by these tactics, but it's not relegated to race. It's the spirit that looks for any opportunity to ultimately procreate this poison. So like I said, it accelerated in the 80s and 90s with the spirit of poverty that ran rampant, and ultimately then did what to the masculine energy? Depreciated his value, because a lot of men couldn't get jobs in those days. The economy was not really fixed in the favor of those that didn't have a certain education, let alone a certain color, or a certain come from. So you had a lot of people that were shut out of the workforce or deduced to like menial jobs that barely made ends meet. So that depreciates a male's value to take care of his family, because if he can't do what a man is supposed to do, support his family and take care of his responsibilities, it's emasculating. So then what did they go and do? They go and actually sell the drugs that infiltrated the community to start the chaos and the havoc in the first place on what would be prodigies of our creation. Men, some of the most genius men and women are right in our urban communities that have all, not only just life experience and knowledge, but also streetwise and sensibility and creativity, and not to mention the type of levels of genius that are in the prison system. Okay, so consider what I'm saying here. I'm not even, which is this vibe right here with the Nine of Swords, the prison, locked up. But it's like, it comes to the point where, it's a calling unto us, and those that see, that get it in one regard or another, to not be the sacrifice anymore, to ultimately like live above the fray in some regard. And it doesn't mean that you got to go, because what he say, when I die, when I get out, I'm gonna put on all my people. Something he says about I'ma always live illegal, and when I get on, I'm gonna put on all my people. That speaks to the mentality right there that's been perpetuated over and over again. Now consider, he got kids somewhere out there that are a product of that mentality. What they gonna do but recreate, what they've known, what they've been told, what they've been conditioned to do. It's the same on a low level as what I'm speaking about in terms of, I'm just using the urban community, of which I am a product of, mind you, because just so you know, I still live, well now I've returned here, but I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, born and raised, went to Camden Public School, and then I transitioned into some other areas of school through high school, and then ultimately to college. And if it wasn't for me being able to leave the city to know that there was more to explore, I may have fallen victim in the same ways that, some that never made it out have in some regards. And in some regards, I still have, which I'll speak about on another day, but not more of a victim. I've been put in a position to see from the bottom exactly what it is, so that I could speak to the experience of someone considered to be on the lowest of the totem pole, i.e. a mother that has had to depend on public assistance, food stamps, Section 8, a Black woman that's marginalized, that when you go into some of these public offices, they make you feel like, even some people that look like you, mind you, make you feel like you're the worst of the worst for being here. When in all actuality, I'm just literally the creation of this procreation of poison. It's just that I personally I know that I was put in a position to be here so that I could ultimately speak truth to power, or speak power to truth is ultimately what I like to say, so that I could be the example of what it looks like to perhaps need assistance, but not be to have assistance from the system, but not be but not be a servant to the system in a sense. You know what I mean? And in all actuality, if you think about the history of our people and how we've been oppressed and depressed, poor people in general, a lot of the systems that have been put into place have been weaponized for our oppression, i.e. Black people or people of color or poor people in general, whereas they were actually created to be of service and of support to the minority majority, i.e. those that are of Caucasian descent, that actually created the program in the first place, if you feel me. Meaning a lot of the housing support systems and like Section 8 and things like that were not available to Black people. They actually were kept out of those types of supports. They were started to ultimately support the white population. And that when they figured out a way to ultimately weaponize those programs and those systems, as I said, to put a damper on the communities that that they ultimately put in the position to need them in the first place, by limiting the possibilities of the job market and education and the disparity of education in the neighborhoods that between the suburbs and the urban community, where there was definitely a stark difference. So if you don't have the best education, your chances are marginalized to excel and be successful in any other way. Like I said, I went to a great school in the city, but it was one of the few great schools in the city, even back in that time. And then I left the city to go to high school and then ultimately to college. If I had not done that, who knows if I would have had the same experience in life, So all that to say that it's time's up for all of this crap, because like I said, there are some of us that have been like almost stationed as agents in certain positions of poverty and misfortune and disadvantage, and it really has been like a survival of the fittest. Like, you were really kind of tested in the field to see what you would do with the best and worst of life. Because for as much as I've had I've experienced the worst, I've also experienced the best in some regard as well. And it's weird because it's really been a toss-up on each side of the spectrum. I've literally had the worst and I've had the best. I've had the best seemingly in my actual waking life, in a way that I could focally see, and I've had the worst, been victim to mental manipulation and oppression and psychological abuse and creative confinement and even spiritual rape in some ways and shapes and forms on the other end of the spectrum too, in a more covert way, that if you actually didn't know how to get deep into your lower natures and didn't know like how to get into the depths of your soul, i.e. through this hangman experience where you're calling in enlightenment and being patient enough to sit and wait for it to come through, and to being insistent and persistent about healing, really finding the whys of what you do and who you are and why you are where you are. I could have taken my worst experiences and just said, well, I guess I effed up. I guess this one's on me, or, I guess I deserve this, or it's because of where I come from, or it's because I made a wrong choice in who my baby daddy is, or, all these things that I was supposed to be used to ultimately beat me down into some point of submission and servitude and slavery of my mind and of the energetic force that was wielding over me. It empowered me. It made me curious. It made me ambitious to know the come from of my creativity. Where is this coming from? Where is the root? Not everybody is ordained to do that. It's risky business and it's hard work, but there are some that have been ordained to do it for the purposes of showing that it can be done. Because some people are ordained to do it, kind of pioneering that path on their own. Some people need a little bit of support or evidence of that possibility so that they can maybe take that path themselves. And of course, there are some that just may not be interested at all. Survival of the fittest. Some may never ever want to ascend to any other level beyond what they can see and sensationalize and materialize for themselves. And I suppose that's okay. At least in my mind, I'm starting to really cope with that idea, because like I said, if it were up to me, everybody would eat from the tree of life, in some regard. But I don't think everybody is supposed to. At least not now. So anyway, I feel like I just went all around the world on this, which is why I know it's something that I got to dig into and kind of, like maybe organize a bit more, which is the daunting task for me. That's the that's where I am intimidated, because there's so much in my heart to say regarding this, that I want to say it well, and I want to say it in a way that honors the spirit that has imparted it to me, and that is honorable to anyone that is listening. But ultimately, these cycles of toxicity, this is what this is representing here with the Six of Cups. This is literally that procreation that can be deemed in any regard. It can be something that is pure passion or pure poison. That's this disparity here with the Six of Cups. And even the white flowers kind of represent the purity of it all, right? But it's on a matter of choice. Like the hangman ultimately is stuck in a place where he's waiting on enlightenment to make a choice forward, and how you're going to work ahead to create this reality for yourself. Are you going to be ultimately working for the purposes of perpetuating this poison, or are you going to work in the force of purifying what's already been done, maybe even within your own life experience? Because like I said, this is not just past experience, like the past decade or 20 years ago, or even when you were a child. This is past life. This is something that's been happening over and over in some way, shape, and form. Just as I gave the example of how they transitioned it from, they used the feminist movement and planted that seed, that bad seed, into the Black community and the urban communities, as you know. And then what I was saying is, I don't think I ever really got to it, that the incitement was that women had to be independent, but then it started to be like a roar, like a rage behind it, you know, with Black women in particular, where we almost started to kind of despise our men because of the lack of support and dependence that we didn't have to count on. We didn't really turn that rage on the system per se. I mean, some did, because it was kind of like a revolutionary time, especially even in hip hop through the 80s and 90s. But that got quenched, you know, that got squelched, I guess I should say, with, you know, with the more glitz and glamour, you know, the shiny suits, you know, glamorizing hip hop in a way that made it more appealing, you know, like hip hop and rap used to be out the mud at first, but they took that, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy, but they took that, turned it into a way to ultimately like seduce the masses by way of stardom, you know, because before you wasn't really you were a star in the community of hip hop and hip hop heads and those that loved rap, but until it became something that could be monetized, it wasn't expanded globally in the way that it is today. It was taken from its more pure essence and the novelty of it all, and inflated in such a way to ultimately project this illusion of fame. Like, that's when we really got into rappers being, you know, hella wealthy, and that all illusion, because it was backed by this power, this force, these labels, these companies, these investors, more so the labels and the industry itself that kind of built itself around that genre, because it saw value in it. It saw the influence and power that it had on the masses and on, you know, the most influential portion of culture that there is, which is, like I said, the urban community. And anyone that looks to the urban community, which it always has been this way, for any signs and cues or inspiration, you know, it's all connected, which is why hip hop more or less is still, well, hip hop, rap, whatever it is in its form now, is still one of the most impactful genres even now all over the world. Where even in that, it's starting to depreciate in value in a sense by way of the implosion of this energy that's been put behind it. Now what they've been doing is infusing violence into it, you know, and inciting violence through encouraging only certain artists to, you know, project this very specific message. But that's kind of, like I said, imploding from the inside out, because everybody's killing each other. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the diabolical thing it's always a ticking time bomb eventually. But the issue is that no matter how many bombs go off in society, if we don't start to see the source of that explosion and that implosion by way of this poison, this seed, it's a small seed. If we don't get real with what it is in our own lives, first and foremost, which is why it all comes down to how you're healing and transmuting those very personal experiences of your own before you can make any general, global, national impact, universal impact, the survival of the fittest, is going to ultimately implode the whole world, because the powers that so-called be, or those that continuously see value in displacing these energies, went from feminists to now fire the angry black woman. You know what I mean? That's how it transforms. It's what's the right word? It shapeshifts. The seed, it shapeshifts into different forms and ultimately contaminates everything that it inseminates and everything that it attaches to. And like I said, angry black woman who is marginalized in the urban community, and maybe she gets a chance to work, because that's what happens. The black women did start to get better jobs and things like that before, over black men first and foremost. But why? Because feminine energy is essential. You know what I mean? You could still siphon that energy and ultimately gain a great return from it, even as you're suppressing it and containing it in a way, which is ultimately what I'm going to talk about. That's the truth of the matter of what's been downloaded to me. So you've been suppressing her energetically, cut off her, limited her choices as to how she gets to be successful only by this and that and that and this. You cut off her support system, her confidence, really and truly, by way of feeling secure and supported and sound in her own mind, body, and spirit. Then you give her ultimately the supplement for her success. This is the way you measure your success. But then who gets left in the dust but the masculine vibration, who ultimately was depleted by that same diabolical source? He doesn't get the same choices. He got to fight a little harder to even get the few options that are available, especially in the job market back then in the 80s and 90s. So they get relegated to illegal activities such as selling drugs, hustling, stealing, doing diabolical things for a return, ultimately for support and security. And then what do? They get sent off into prison, and demonized for ultimately for choosing the best possible options of all the evils that, like Seven of Cups energy, of all the evils that have been presented to them. They just had to choose one by God to just continue to survive. Like I said, we're all accountable. We're, just as the feminine energy, as she's been leading the charge of healing for sure, the masculine is still accountable for his own healing too. And I think that's what the catching up. I think even universally, Mars eventually is going to catch up to Venus in some type of way. That's happening in some way or shape or form. I can't remember when and how, but I know that that's a thing where they're going to end up in the same alignment eventually. And that's what's been happening. It's like, even in the small examples that I've been given, the feminine energy has been catching up with her healing. She went from the angry black woman, is taking care of the house and the home. I don't need no man. I could do it on my own, which is imbalanced, because you do need the man. You do need that support system, that protection, that security. We do, but we were told that we didn't. And then we were given no option but to continue to keep going without it anyway and make a way. But then what do we carry but that emotional baggage and resentment for the fact that we had to in the first place? And that carried on into our seeds, we sowed that seed into our children, who, because they didn't have fathers in the home, or they saw this great disparity between their mothers and fathers, they didn't have the proper example that they needed to carry on in a productive, prosperous sense, and then their seed, and so on. And yes, along the way, people have become more educated and have become more successful in their own right, but it's still been only in regards to, just like people have become more successful in hip hop, right? You know, there was a great transition between when people that were making no money to then people were making, you know, at least projected to be looking like millionaires, you know, to be wearing the gold chains and the diamond necklaces and driving hella cars and having expensive houses, and, you know, this projection of prosperity that was ultimately, you know, that was a facade, more or less, because most of what they own was connected to the label, which is why a lot of artists that may have had fame and fortune at that time don't really have it anymore unless they invested or divested their energy in some other way, i.e. the Jiggas of the world, which even he probably truly isn't as lucrative and wealthy as he's projected to be. It's yet another prop up for us to say, oh, well, Jay-Z is a billionaire, and if he did it, and anyone can. But the entanglements that he's probably enmeshed in, just to be able to say that he is where he is financially, are probably just as diabolical in some regards, not holistically, but in some regards, they're probably just as tainted as they would be for any of us that's like struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. Like one wrong move piss off one investor, you know, you say one thing out of alignment and it could all fall down ultimately if he's not continuously invested into this power scheme. And you know what I'm trying to say. And I feel like I'm saying too much. I know I am, because this instance been burnt out, as I like to say. But I just feel incited to say what I needs to say in this moment, and I'm going to come back later and continue on at some point. To put it lightly now, we're being called to transmute our experiences in our own right. If you feel any calling at all to healing, to going deep with diving into what makes you tick, or what has stopped your tick, you know, what makes you unproductive in the same regard as what makes you productive. To consider where, you know, your so-called missteps, when you're looking back on your life in any regard, let it be a productive reflection about where you may have done something differently if given a different choice or an opportunity, and you get the chance to recreate that energy, or regenerate that energy, I should say, in the present moment, not to continue to look back on it with any regret or remorse or disdain or even resentment. It's about how you're transmuting that energy to make it a powerful life force for you now to move ahead. Because anything else, you're just playing right into that cycle of toxicity that ultimately needs your seed and your womb to continue to procreate. Without us continuing to invest our energy into this broken system as it is, and it's not about the justice system or the legal system or even our business structures. It's not about the physicality of these things. It's about the spiritual essence of them, and the motivation and the fuel behind the force of which they operate, which ultimately is by way of our lack of self-awareness, of knowing that we are the supreme power, that without our energy invested, whether it be in buying the products or watching the shows or listening to the music or following the artist or voting for the candidates, how about it? You know what I'm saying? Like all these things we invest our energy into become a fuel to just keep the machine well oiled. And there are some of us, like I said, that absolutely will never stop fueling that machine. But those of us that are of high-powered essence, that know better ultimately, which there are enough of us at this point in time to make a difference, I truly believe, we need to come together in our own wholeness, first and foremost, and then one to another to ultimately form the force that would help to progress the creative consciousness and ascend it holistically, to literally like raise the ceiling of our consciousness globally. If we have a mind to, if we have a will to, it is possible to do so, you know. But let's continuing to fuel the same system. Like, could just consider what you're giving your time and energy to. It starts on a very personal level. When you're working a job that you hate, that's fueling the system, because you're not doing what is ultimately exalting your highest frequency of energetic force. You're fueling it into a system that you feel in servitude to, or feel some enslavement by. When you're in a relationship even that you know is imbalanced and you know it doesn't reflect your highest good, you're serving the system that is broken. You are a force fuel to that system, whether it's single motherhood or toxic relationships and marriages. It's all the same. If it's not you could be a single mom and be living your best life because you're in an energetic frequency to attract what is ultimately going to support that force, not something that's going to deplete it, you know. So it works both ways, and you can be in a marriage and be, you know, really dying inside ultimately, because you know that there's no happiness, no joy, no fulfillment or peace in that situation. So either way, it really comes down to how you are serving yourself, mostly. That's what it all comes down to. And we sell our souls for dividends on the dollar every single day, just on account of submitting and surrendering to this ideal of social acceptance and security and success by societal standards. And that is continuing to fuel the force that without us, without our commitment, our work, our devotion, our creativity, would literally fall apart, which is why it is in every way, shape, and form. Every pillar, whether it be business, education, religion, government, and there's always one more that I always forget. I always forget that fifth one. Even if I say four, it's always one I forget. But there are 5 pillars ultimately that hold up the structure of our society as we know it. And it all takes our energy to fuel the mechanics of it. When we are absolved of investment, or we withdraw, for that matter, our fortune, which is our energy, our energetic field, from contributing to that force, it collapses. And that's why in such things as entertainment, we're seeing a temperance vibration where it's being balanced out to something that it's never been before. Where you're seeing the strike in Hollywood, and you're seeing more independent artists, and labels are pretty much going to shit. You know what I mean? But they're finding different ways, i.e. in YouTube. Now they try to invest in independent artists and give you hella money to do what you do. But guess what? Then you're enslaved to those same investors too. So like I said, it calls for us to be vigilant about the new tactics of war that are at hand, because the enemy is crafty. It don't just stop where it's defeated. It tries to recreate some new tactic and some new strategy to ultimately enslave the masses in some regard, because it's hungry for this power. It's always going to be hungry for this power as long as we don't starve it out. And I don't know how that gets to be holistically, because sometimes when I look at the task at hand, like, I know definitely some things are being balanced out, and some of the diabolical essences of our society are definitely meeting their karma. And you know what I'm saying? Like, even with religion, it doesn't have the hold on people like it used to, by way of imposing and infusing guilt and shame and, unworthiness. It doesn't have that same effect anymore. So even if you are in any religious affiliation, you don't express it or experience it the way that even your parents did, or your grandparents, or beyond them. It's a different exchange. So every system that was created to do a thing for the purposes of oppressing and depressing the masses' creativity in general, keeping us from evolving consciously, is being overturned and disempowered in some way. It's just a matter of us continuing to stay vigilant, like stay geared up, put on the whole armor of God. Why don't you? If you know, you know, because there's always a new strategy, and maybe not always, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Maybe this is the end of the turning over and it's happening right before our eyes. And if so, then what a great time to be alive, right? But it's not before there won't be more tactics, at least strategized, even if they fail before they even make it off out of the war room. You know what I mean? I.e. the whole new COVID 2.0 situation where people really aren't biting on that like they did the first time around. But it won't stop them from trying to engage with whomever will. Some people are getting shots already. Some people are getting boosters. Some people are wearing masks out here. Some people are starting to get that fear in their body again. And what does that do? That fear fuels the system, makes you start doing things that you really don't like. Possession you don't really want to do, buying things you don't really want to buy, adhering to laws that don't even make sense, to mandates that don't even that you don't even agree with. That's the system. It'll always find a tactic, or it persists at this time to find a tactic. But we are all warriors in our own regard in some way, shape, or form, even those of us that don't mean to be, because our force is so powerful that even when you don't know you're using it, it's being used by something or someone somewhere. So for those of us that know the power in our being, that know exactly the value of our vitality, it's our responsibility not to save the world, but just to really be conscious of how you're investing it in your own right. That alone, that consciousness alone, I do believe would ultimately help to save the world in some regard, just by way of you being the example that spirit into matter, that transmutation, that transmission of a transcendent force. Whereas because your offspring know, in spirit and in truth, the things that you do are impacted and influenced by what you know and who you be and what you do and what you have, you share in some regard, because that's the spirit that you embody. It doesn't mean you sacrifice yourself for the sake of others. We don't need to do that. That's not the calling now. It's really for us to ultimately surrender ourselves to our own higher power, the force within us, not outside of us, but within us, that is most supreme, so that we can emit that frequency of energy from the inside out. You'd be surprised how powerful and potent, obviously, if you consider how many people are the target of suppression that do emit that type of force. It's not by chance. It's because it's known by the adverse energy just how powerful alone it is for someone to just know that they're powerful and to know that their force is invaluable and unlimited, and eternal. God, this is eternal life right here with this Ace of Wands. To know that there's nothing that can ultimately kill a man who knows that he has, unlimited breath in his being, not his body, but his being lives on forever. That means everything that you do, and for crying out loud, it might be even greater than that, which is what I'm saying. A lot of downloads have been coming to me. It could be in the actual practical sense that seems fantastical, where you don't die, you're immortal. But what I'm saying is, even in the most practical sense, the simplistic sense, that everything that you create in this life, in the vibration and vitality such as this, is going to live on. It cannot die. When you create with vitality, it has a breath span of life that is just, it literally is eternal. It's eternal. There's nothing that can kill it, because before they could get to you, you've already impacted and influenced enough people that it's made an impression that that seed was planted. And if that seed can get planted, there's always a chance, there's always hope that it just might fall on good enough soil for it to germinate. And if it germinates, then by God, it's a possibility that it might take root. And if it takes root, then by God, there's a possibility that it just might grow. And if it grows, there's a possibility that by God, it just might have seed or pollinate another plant or organism, in which then the harvest is plentiful. It's unstoppable at that point. All right, so I'm not even going to turn on the other card because I was just going, and I don't apologize for it, but I do thank you for being here if you still are. Like I said, keep an eye out for future posts. Definitely encourage you to check out my last couple, because Spirit's just been talking lately, and even go back and see some of those messages that I said I've shared where it was just me and my notes talking. And yeah, and also just so if you haven't seen the last message that I posted on a much higher and brighter note, I am going to do 100 subscribers giveaway. I did post a video about it, so check that out. But ultimately, I'm going to give away a free gift. And I'll share the ways in which you can have a chance to win when we actually here in this Soul Fam and Friends environment hit 100. Right now, at last I checked, we were exactly at 78, which, as I said, is one subscriber for every card in the tarot deck, which I am really thrilled about, believe it or not. That really it just makes me so happy that I've grown in this way with you here and by way of your support. And before that, when I get to the 100 mark, when we get to the 100 mark, I wanted to do something, to celebrate that and to honor you for your support. And the way that I'm going to do it is by doing a giveaway, some chance to win a gift. So stay tuned, turn your post notifications on if they're not on already. Tell a friend so we can get from 78 to 100 even faster than it's projected at this point. And share a video or two as well. That's definitely a sure way to at least expand a message that may resonate with you. And definitely like the video, because that also helps it to ultimately get some traction and some legs by way of viewership and engagement. So all that being said, I do appreciate you for being here, not just in this moment, but however you have engaged with me on this channel thus far. And I definitely pray to have your continued support in the future. All right. Much love to you and all that you're doing. It's a little rainy here for me. I don't know what it's doing where you are, but I think the East Coast is pretty much getting the remnants of that tropical storm that's passing through. And I think it's pretty much going to be rainy all weekend. So if you are caught in that vibe somewhere, safe travels to you wherever you are. Keep your spirits up. We know the sun is always shining above the clouds. So even if it's a bit gloomy where you are, I hope the sun is still shining in your heart nonetheless. All right. And until next time, I leave you with all of that being said with peace.